Hi, I'm Bill. I'm going to read a story. After God saved his people from slavery, he led them on a long journey through the desert. How long, you ask? Well, I'm not exactly sure how many miles it was, but the journey took them 40 years. 40 years, that's older than you for sure. It might even be older than your mommy and daddy. Go ahead, ask them. They won't mind. Now, if you think 40 years sounds like a long time in the desert, just think how God's people felt. They felt hot, like you do when you go to the ocean, but with no ocean in sight. They felt dirty, like you do after you play outside all day, but with no fun bath time to look forward to. They felt hungry, like you do when dinner is taking forever, but the only dinner they got every day was bread.
Yummy,
So
yummy.
when God said, all right, enough wandering around in the desert, time for your new home, you can imagine how excited they all were. But they were also afraid because the first place God told them to go was Jericho. Jericho was the biggest city any of them had ever seen, with walls so high it looked like they reached right up to the sky. God's people began to doubt what God had said. They doubted if they would ever live in their new home. They doubted if God was really with them. God's people asked their new leader, Joshua, what to do. Joshua had taken over after Moses died, and he seemed to know a lot about battles. If anyone knew how to knock down big walls, Joshua did. So he got to work coming up with a plan. That is, until God told Joshua that he had a plan. He wasn't the plan that Joshua expected, but then again, God often does things we don't expect, doesn't he? The most important part of the plan was for Joshua and God's people to be strong and courageous. They needed to believe that God, who they couldn't see, was stronger than the walls of Jericho, which they definitely could see. This was how God's plan worked. Early one morning, Joshua's army put on their armor and took out their swords, and together they went marching around the city. Not 1 day, not 2 days, not even 3 days, but 7 days. On the seventh day, God told his people to march around the city 7 times. Then God told everyone to blow their trumpets and scream, and no one could explain it. But just as they screamed, the walls of Jericho began to shake. Then they began to crack. Then they all fell to pieces. The strong walls of Jericho weren't strong anymore. They weren't even walls anymore. That was just one battle that God won for his people. You see, God was with Joshua and his people, even when it was hard, even when the people doubted if they would find their new home, even when Jericho was scary, God was with them. Years later, when Joshua was very old, he reminded God's people of everything God had done. God has been strong for you, Joshua said. If you keep believing he's the strongest, he'll keep protecting you. He'll make all the wrong things right and all the dark things light. And God did have a plan to make all the wrong things right and all the dark things light. He was going to send Jesus to lead his people to another new home, a permanent home in heaven forever. Thank you.